Hello there, and a very warm welcome to Chazingdra Chats, the show where we take a stroll through the life stories of people in the Pokemon community, discovering the 6 Pokemon on their dream team along the way. I'm Chazingdra, otherwise known as Charlie Merriman, merry by name, merry by nature, a host and commentator for the Pokemon Video Game Championship series, as well as a content creator. And this week, I very much hope that we can brighten your day because my guest is the current champion of EUIC for Pokemon Go. It is MEweedle, otherwise known as Maxwell Ember. Maxwell, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you. I hope you are too.
Yeah, very well, thank you. Thanks so much for joining me here. Thank you so much for braving talking to a VG person about Pokemon Go, about you generally. But
Yeah.
we'll get into that very shortly. So, again, congratulations on winning EUIC. That's an absolutely astounding achievement. And for anyone who's not so familiar with you, MEweedle or Maxwell, can you give a little introduction about yourself?
So as Charlie already said, I'm Maxwell, or in-game MEweedle. I am the 2024 EUIC champion, also the 2022 Senior Division World Champion when they still had that in Pokemon Go, and also the 2023 Stuttgart Regional Champion.
So basically, you're good at Pokemon Go. That's what we're.
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
That's what we're gaining from that. Okay, well, brilliant, and I'm sure we'll get to know you a little bit beyond Pokemon as well. So, Emmy Weedle, you're no stranger to the competitive stage, of course, but I believe what we're going to first talk about right now, we're going to go back to initially getting into Pokemon Go PvP. So, are you
Yeah.
someone who, as soon as Pokemon Go came out, they downloaded it and were playing it?
As soon as Pokemon Go came out, I downloaded it and played it. That was like back in September or whatever, 2016. So I enjoyed just going out and catching Pokemon. The PvP itself was not actually released until like 2018 or something, but I had actually stopped playing by 2018 because I had other stuff going on and I hadn't really, I wasn't that into Pokemon Go specifically at that point. I was still into Pokemon generally, but not really that into Pokemon Go at that time. So it was really around 2020 when the quarantine came, COVID and everything. I actually got back into Pokemon Go because it was, something to do when you go out and, rather than just going outside for the sake of fresh air, it's going outside, grabbing some fresh air, and also doing something that's fun and enjoyable. Uh, and that was when my father actually started talking about this new, or it'd been 2 years by then, but it was for me new PvP function, and it caught my attention, and from there I started really getting into this new aspect of the game.
I'm not sure many people can say that it was their parents who introduced them
The other way around, yeah.
to any aspects of Pokemon. But so was your dad on Pokemon Go at that point?
Yeah. He
Okay.
was he was on Pokemon Go. I think he had been playing for like a lot longer than me, even. So I think even before the pandemic, he had still been playing Pokemon Go as well. So
Mm,
yeah.
that's fantastic. I mean, does he compete as well?
No. Uh, he does play some competitive PvP, but only really, the in-game function. He doesn't compete at any of these tournaments, sadly.
I see.
It would be
Okay.
fun to see, but I think he just doesn't think he's good enough.
Well, I'm sure that there's some undiscovered talent there. Sounds like there probably is.
That's what I'd like to hope. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Um, okay, great. And then you said so before Pokemon Go came out, you were a Pokemon fan. So what is that through
Yeah.
playing the main series games or?
I hadn't always played the main series games, but when I was like a lot younger, so in primary school, I collected the cards a bit, not very much, but I enjoyed those. And I believe I don't remember when, but I think I got my first Pokemon game on the Switch after 2020.
Hmm.
So yeah, I hadn't really played any main series games until that point. It was only really the cards.
I see. Fair enough. Um, okay. What do you think is it about Pokemon that appeals to you?
I don't know. I mean, it's just a fun game for me. I can't say anything specifically, but I just enjoy the concept. I enjoy the different characters. The different ways you can play it is cool. Just how many different things there are. Like, yeah, as I already said, the trading card game, their main series games. There's Pokemon Go. There are other spin-off games as well that I enjoy playing.
Yeah.
So
Well, it absolutely
just
gives us so many ways in which we can enjoy the game. And then speaking of the fact that you like the characters, let's get into your first Pokemon for your dream team. So the idea here is not for Maxwell to build the strongest competitive team. It's just to choose 6 Pokemon that are special to him in some way. And Maxwell has chosen these Pokemon in advance. I have no idea what they are, so let's discover them together. So, what's the first Pokemon on your dream team, Maxwell?
so my first Pokemon would have to be Charizard, because for me, growing up as a child, that was always like the cool Pokemon, and hence it was also my starter Pokemon for Pokemon Go. So for me, Charizard is a special Pokemon in that sense.
Yeah, Charizard is always a fan favorite, isn't it? Is it?
Yeah.
Have you always been a fan of dragons?
Uh, I wouldn't say as much anymore, but definitely, when I was growing up, it was just, whoa, these cool looking dragon type kind of Pokemon, despite Charizard not being a dragon type,
Yeah, I was going to
So-
say, you could have gone either way with that question, because obviously Charizard not being a dragon type, yeah, fine, is just a flying lizard that breathes fire. Okay, yeah, well, you've got to go with that. You've got to go with that first starter Pokemon on your team, haven't you? Are you... Now, this is truly a question coming from someone who isn't entirely familiar with Go PvP, but
Yeah.
Charizard, does that have any competitive viability in Go?
Yeah, it actually does, or maybe it did. Uh, at least last year, Charizard was like a big kind of important Pokemon for the PvP scene. It's generally quite, as we would call it, like squishy or glassy, so it dies quite quickly. And generally in Pokemon Go, the stronger Pokemon are ones that survive longer, just the way that the stats are programmed in Pokemon Go. So Charizard being a very attack-weighted Pokemon, hadn't really seen much play. But until, as I said, last year, when Fire and Flying was a pretty good typing into the meta, and it was just a Pokemon that has a strong move in Blast Burn and a so-called bait move in Dragon Claw. So it was really oppressive and could one-shot lots of the Pokemon in the meta at the time, like Registeel or Galarian Stunfisk. It was good against the Medicham, which was really big at the time as well.
Okay.
But sadly at the moment, it hasn't seen much play.
Well, if there's anyone who can bring it back, I firmly believe
Well,
that you could be the person.
Not sure.
No, I am sure. I mean, your surname is Ember as well. I mean,
I guess
I think
if you look at it that way, but I've got other fire types on my mind, so...
Okay, fair enough. Anyway, lovely to have that warming shout out to your initial first partner Pokemon there. Okay, great. So we're going from getting into Go PvP over the pandemic and from Charizard into you reached number 1 on the Go Battle League leaderboard. So when would this have been?
So this was really important to me because obviously when I initially started playing Pokemon Go PvP, I was not good. But that's how it is for everyone, right? You need to start somewhere. So that was around 2020, as I mentioned. Reaching number 1 on the leaderboards was around the summer of 2022. I was actually on holiday, I think in Lithuania or something. And then I randomly I hit number 1 on the leaderboard. and that was a big thing for me because given that it was in the summer, it was just before Worlds as well, and nobody really knew who I was at that point in time because I hadn't really done well in a major kind of tournament or major kind of big thing in PvP. And yeah, that really kind of alerted a lot of people that, there's someone kind of new on the PvP scene.
New kid on the block for sure. That was just before World Summer 2022. So, and you got into the PvP over the pandemic. So, was it when you hit number one? Presumably by that point, you said when you started, you weren't too good at the game, as none of us are when we first start anything. But surely, when you hit number one, it can't have been a total surprise. You must have been aware that you were building your skills and getting better.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it was still kind of a surprise because at that point I had never been that high on the leaderboards or like in a previous season. So I guess for some people it might have been out of nowhere, but it did happen over time. You obviously always need a bit of luck to go your way to also reach there. But yeah,
yeah, of course. There's always going to be that luck element, but it's the way we.
Yeah.
And yeah, of course, the players who are really good tend to have that consistency in their results. So clearly, there's a way of dealing with the luck-based things as well that you've been able to get a handle on. Wow, fascinating. Okay, and then who was on your team when you hit number one? That's got to be a pretty special team for you.
Yeah, for sure. I think I built like most of the way up the leaderboard in Great League, so that's Pokemon up to 1,500 CP. But I think the final set to number one was in a league with the Ultra League, which is 2,500 CP, and it would have been with Trevenant, Walrein, and Swampert. So at that time, that was kind of just a standard team of 3 strong Pokemon that go well together and complement each other well. So yeah, that's
very nice.
That was big for me.
It's fascinating to hear that. It's always interesting to hear the Pokemon that are good across the different games because Trevenant, Walrein, and Swampert, you never see. You never see in VG. Yeah, I mean, possibly they'll have had their moments depending on the Pokemon over the years, but yeah. Okay, so you're on holiday in Lithuania. Wow, what a way to sweeten the holiday there as well. Yeah, and so yeah, that I can imagine that was a really special moment for you, and also sort of, I imagine that sort of felt like the start of a new chapter for you. But before we get into that new chapter that we're starting, time to get a new Pokemon for your dream team. Who's going to be joining Charizard? Who's Pokemon number 2?
So it would actually have to do with something that happened immediately after and of course kind of connected to the number one leaderboard. It would be, for me, Poltegeist. That might seem a bit of a surprise because it wasn't even in Pokemon Go, or it still isn't in Pokemon Go. But just after I hit number one, I was invited to a team because there was like sadly it doesn't exist anymore. There was a kind of a team format called Factions, and there were some people that then invited me to their team called Tea and Pizza, and their main logo Pokemon is exactly Poltegeist, and that's why Poltegeist would have to be my number 2 Pokemon.
Very nice. I'm glad there's a connection there with your with hitting number one.
Originally, the team was composed of British and Italian players. Or mainly British and Italian players, and hence, the tea representing the UK and the pizza. And there isn't a pizza Pokemon, so I guess when they formed the team, they decided to take the tea Pokemon in Poltegeist.
The mind boggles when it comes to thinking of what a pizza Pokemon could manifest as. But okay, Charizard and Poltegeist. I like that you've got a deep connection to a Pokemon without necessarily having used it, but what it represents, of course, is what it's all about. Okay, so you're just talking about starting a new chapter, having reach number 1 on the Go Battle League leaderboard. And that was summer of 2022, just before Worlds. And I believe what you're going to talk us through next is that experience of Worlds 2022.
Yeah. So Worlds 2022 is obviously very important for me, as I mentioned at the beginning. I ended up winning in the seniors age division. There weren't that many people there, but some of the people that were there are considered to be, or were considered to be, some of the best players in the world, just out of any age group. I don't know how it is exactly in the VGC or the TCG, but at least in Go, the seniors players can still compete against the masters players perfectly well. But yeah, it was a bit of a surprise for, as I said, for everyone, because even though I had hit number 1 on the GBL leaderboard, I still wasn't, really well known, or as well known as some of the other players that were there. But I managed to win the whole thing, didn't lose a single set. So yeah.
Wow. That's phenomenal. Of course, Worlds 2022 was in London as well. Yeah. It's, how did it feel? Now you were born in the UK, but had you been back to the UK before Worlds that year?
Oh yeah, we had regularly visited it because my grandparents still live in the UK, so we visited them a few times before. We don't go once a year, so it's not like very often that we've been there. We're not kind of attached to the UK specifically in such a big way that we need to visit our home country very often. But yeah, definitely been there before.
Okay. So, but I mean, it must have made that moment feel all the more special, I guess. The fact that you won in a country that you have such a connection to. Having that's quite a summer you had. You reached number 1 on the leaderboard, and then you win Worlds. I mean, going in, of course, you must have, in the back of your mind, you must have been thinking, I could do this. But then, how seriously do you believe it?
I didn't really believe it that seriously, to be completely honest, because as I said, I had only reached number 1 in GBL at that point, and there were still a lot more impressive people than me who I had to compete against. And something else important to note is the difference between the GBL and the format of play Pokemon. So GBL, you just have 3 Pokemon, and then you use those, you enter a battle, you face against someone else's 3 Pokemon. Whereas in Show 6 you have, or the play Pokemon format, you have 6 Pokemon, and then for each battle you choose 3 of those. Yeah. So it's kind of a completely different skill in that sense as well. So despite having performed well in the GBL format, the Show 6 format is like a completely different one. So
wow. And so that was your first time playing that format seriously?
I had competed in EUIC in 2022, but that's how I got my Worlds qualification as well. But I was the only one there, so I kind of just got my qualification for free.
You were the only one who turned up at EUIC 2022 for Go.
That's why they removed the age divisions after that season, because there just weren't enough young people going to these tournaments yet. So
I see. Wow. Okay. So. Wow. Yeah, you turn up and you get your Worlds invite. That's
Wow. I know.
Well, clearly though, you took that and ran with it. It's not like you proved your worth, is what I'm saying.
Of course.
And ending up winning the World Championships. That's extraordinary. That really does set you on a new path there. So let's go from there into who's the third Pokemon joining your dream team. Who's going to be joining Charizard and Poltegeist?
Yeah, so it would also have a connection to Worlds, and it would have to be Araquanid for me. Araquanid was the Pokemon, like the main Pokemon on the team that I used to win Worlds. It was one that was really off everybody else's radars, and nobody had really seriously thought about using Araquanid. And it did really well then for me because people didn't really build teams super strong against it, or they hadn't really practiced against it. And that proved to be correct, as in the winners finals. So we have a double elimination bracket. There's like the winners finals. It really kind of core broke my opponent's team. They didn't really have a good answer against it out of any of their 6 Pokemon. And then I happened to face that same opponent then in the grand finals after winning the winners finals. So it really put in a lot of work against his team and really helped me win the whole tournament in the end.
Wow. Okay. Now, Araquanid, that is something we have common ground on, I would say. It's well, a bit like for you, I guess, in VG. Araquanid sees some play. It's got its niche. It's hardly the most meta, but very good, especially under Trick Room, where the speed order is reversed. It has seen some success. So I see. Okay. And it feels so good, doesn't it, going into a tournament with a Pokemon that you think is sort of, I think people have been sleeping on this Pokemon, and then it comes out on top. It's sort of, winning itself feels good, but then doing it, having the foresight to do it with a particular Pokemon like that just sort of adds to it, right?
Yeah, of course.
What gave you the confidence to think, no, this is the right call?
I mentioned before on my push to number 1 on the leaderboards, most of it was in the Great League, the 1500 CP League, and it was the final push in the Ultra League that got me over the line with the Trevenant Swampert Wolverine. I had actually used Araquanid to climb all the way up in that 1500 CP League, and that was really, it gave me a lot of practice with it against certain matchups, because it's a bit of an interesting Pokemon. It has a Bug Bite, which is not the greatest move, but it has Bubble Beam, which is like an attack debuffing move. And I don't know how much you know about all of this, but there's a bunch of like bulk points, which is kind of you lower your opponent's attack, for example, with the Bubble Beam, and then their fast moves will do less damage to you because their attack is lowered. And this isn't always the case because the fast moves are, rounded to the next whole number. So it could be doing whatever 2.3 damage, and if you lower its attack, it might still be doing 2 damage because it's now doing 1.9, so it's rounded up instead of rounded down. So a lot of knowledge with when to kind of drop the opponent's attack with the Bubble Beam with Araquanid was key to my success in the end.
Wow, that's fascinating. It's a really useful insight as well into the intricacies in Pokemon Go. And for anyone who's not aware as well, can you just clarify what a double elimination bracket means?
Oh yeah, of course. So if you imagine kind of like a single elimination bracket where you just have, like in the VGC, that they have a top 8 bracket at the end, and then it's just everybody faces off against their kind of pair, and then they move up, and then in the end it's the finals. The double elimination bracket is similar, except when you lose the first time, you kind of move down into a lower bracket, and you can still fight your way all the way back up through there. So it's kind of as if you have 2 lives.
Okay.
And if you lose once, you kind of drop into the 1 life bracket. And in the end, everybody can lose once and still win the tournament in the end.
Sure.
So that's why there's like the winners final. So that was the kind of the final, if you were to think of it as a single elimination bracket. And then there's the grand finals, which is kind of the winner of the top bracket against the winner of the bottom bracket.
Got it. Okay. Thanks for putting it in video game terms as well, in terms of lives. I appreciate it. Okay, that makes sense. Great. Okay, so from Worlds and Araquanid, we're now going to talk about Stuttgart in I believe the 2023 season, right? So it was actually late 2022, but the 2023
that is correct.
Season. Sure. So just a few months after Worlds, I guess.
Yeah. So at that point there was like a big change in a big change in the meta. Not only a big change in the meta, but like 3 days before Stuttgart, there was some balance changes in Pokemon Go PvP. So there were moves had been tweaked, new ones had been added to Pokemon that previously didn't learn them, and that kind of stuff. So uh, it was kind of a scramble to find a good team for everyone, really, because of the changes that had just happened. Right. So yeah, it was originally going to be Araquanid on my team again, but then they buffed a flying type attack just before Stuttgart, and then a bunch of flying type Pokemon had really become super strong. At the time it was Noctowl. I don't know how Noctowl does in like VGC, but Noctowl was super strong at the time in Go at around Stuttgart's regional time, and that just made it really hard to bring Araquanid as a bug type against a flying type meta. So I had to drop the Araquanid and find something else that worked instead. Yeah.
Yeah, Noctowl, not great in VG, but again, that's fantastic that it does get the representation in Go. I see. Okay, that's this is really a movie that you're building here. We're sort of you're our plucky hero, and then at the sort of the 11th hour before Stuttgart, you got to change your team. So how did you adapt?
So I originally had a kind of a structure of a team. I had, I think, two steel type Pokemon. Then I had a Trevenant, a Medicham. I had a Noctowl, and then I had Araquanid as my last one. So I kind of just dropped the Araquanid, kept the other five, and tried to search for something that fit there instead. It actually channels well into the number 3 Pokemon that would be in my dream team. So it was Mantine for me, because of the reason, as I said, Noctowl was really dominant in that meta. Mantine had Ice Beam, or still has Ice Beam, just doesn't use Ice Beam all the time now, to hit the Noctowl for super effective damage. So it really caught my attention. Also because Medicham was paired with Noctowl commonly at the time, being a flying type to beat the Medicham and having an ice type move to beat the Noctowl was something I thought could do well in Stuttgart.
Yeah. Okay, and there's that eternal debate as to whether it's Mantine or Mantine. Original as well. I mean, apparently it can go either way. I can see how Mantine, marine, but then Mantine,
Yeah,
the word looks like it could be pronounced Mantine.
yeah.
Anyway, okay, so you decide on Mantine going into Stuttgart, and then sorry, you said that Mantine, say, is the fourth Pokemon on your dream team.
Fourth. Oh yeah, sorry, fourth.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
my bad.
Okay.
I think I said third
No
before
worries,
by
no worries.
accident.
That's fine. Okay, so you bring it into Stuttgart, and then tell us about how it went.
So I don't remember exactly all of my matches from Stuttgart 2023, but I do remember in the early rounds against some of the kind of more basic meta teams, it did pretty well. Into the Trevenants, the Medichams, the Noctowls, people were shielding the Bubble Beam baits. I forgot to mention, yeah, Mantine also had Bubble Beam, just like Araquanid. That was just a coincidence. But yeah, it was nice when they thought I was going to use an Ice Beam against them, and then they shielded a Bubble Beam. So the Mantine put in a lot of work for me. Except then in the later rounds, I faced off against some teams that, not deliberately, but just happened to be stronger against Mantine, and then it was a bit harder for me to use it in the later rounds. But it definitely carried me through the earlier stage of the tournament.
Sure. Maybe I shouldn't have mentioned the Mantine pronunciation thing, because now whenever we say it, we're going to have to say both, aren't we? But would you say that you sort of influenced the meta after that point?
I don't actually think I did because then there were a few regionals, I think on the same weekend even, but even the ones afterwards, nobody really used Mantine, and it
Okay.
was just, not on anybody's team who did well. I think in the end, in that season, or in that Play Pokemon season, there was only one other person to qualify for Worlds with a Mantine on their team. So I guess other people just didn't see the same thing that I saw with Mantine, but it paid off
Sure.
for me and
Yeah.
one other person. So
Yeah. So you in the later stages of Stuttgart, there were teams that were more prepared for Mantine, but
yeah.
you tell us about how the rest of that tournament went. How did it end up for you?
So I played against one of my good friends, and he's also a caster. He's called Inadequance or Martine
Mm.
in the winners finals. I remember that match because he had something. He had also kind of like a spice picker, core breaker in Dunsparce,
Mm.
and Dunsparce learnt Rock Slide, which I did not want to see on my Mantine. So for that reason, I was a bit scared to bring it against him. He also had a Registeel, which is the worst possible thing
Mm.
for Mantine to see because it gets one shot by its Zap Cannon that it has.
Mm.
So yeah, Mantine was really not something to bring against him. And then in the grand finals, I was up against Pokesquark from Luxembourg, I believe, and he had also kind of interesting core breaker in Mew, which was pretty good against my team because it had Wild Charge, which is also an electric type move, which my Mantine didn't want to see. So for that reason, it was also hard to bring it against him. But yeah, I could play my way around it with other Pokemon instead. So
Yeah. So you ended up winning Stuttgart as well.
yeah, I mean, it was a bit of a surprise because it was the kind of second tournament I had seriously competed in. The only other one was Worlds where I won, and then I won this one as well. So it was pretty exciting stuff for me.
Yeah. Absolutely incredible. You achieve more in those few months than what people dream of achieving playing these games. Absolutely phenomenal stuff. Um, Wow. Okay. And so with the four Pokemon you've got so far, I'm noticing. I realise that you're not building a competitive team, but there is a bit of a
Yeah, yeah.
weakness to Rock coming out so far with
Oh,
Charizard and Araquanid and
yeah. True,
Mantine.
true.
But we'll see how the other two members balance that out. Okay. So then from Stuttgart in that season, we're going to jump all the way to the end of that season with Worlds in 2023.
Yeah. So Worlds 2023 was not a tournament that I did well in, but for me, it was a big tournament because it was just meeting with like a bunch of friends that I had made in the past year. Because as I mentioned in 2022, I was kind of like a new battler, and not many people really knew who I was. But over the next year since then, I had made a bunch of friends, and it's just really nice, meeting with all of them, having fun together, even if I didn't do too well at the main event. Yeah, it's always like the social part of these tournaments that really makes it worth it.
Oh, for sure. That's always there, no matter how well the tournament goes, and that's what makes it worth attending in the first place. I think it's the people
Yeah.
who are there. Um, and to be honest, I'm just shocked to hear that tournament didn't go well. I mean, we have this narrative of you winning everything, but so you go to Worlds 2023. What do you think was off about your performance there?
I think the main thing was that I only decided on my final team like the day before Worlds, so I
Mm,
didn't really get a bunch of practice. Um, my first match of the day happened, just by coincidence, to be against the player who ended up winning the whole tournament. So uh, you could call that unlucky, or I actually could have beat them, so I didn't get completely destroyed, but they outplayed me, and I made some slightly incorrect plays. I wasn't fully. I didn't fully trust myself in certain kind of game mechanics, and that ended up costing me the match. But you have good days, you have bad days, and I guess that just wasn't one of the good ones. Yeah,
exactly. You've had so much success in your play that you can't. I think it's only human to have off days as well. I mean, and that's what sort of, you know, is what reminds us what we have to do to adjust and adapt and essentially sort of build that muscle back stronger, I guess, heading into future tournaments. It was the more of the social aspect of that particular tournament that stuck with you. So, yeah, would you say lifelong friends were made there?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's also especially nice given that it was in Japan, right? I don't know how it is in the VGC community, but at least in the Pokemon Go community, it's kind of Japan and the rest of, you know, like Europe, North America. They're kind of very split off when it comes to kind of everything, right? Because we don't speak Japanese, not all of them speak English. They kind of have almost a different meta sometimes in these kind of play Pokemon tournaments, and also just the way that they have to qualify is very different. So you don't really see very much of some of these Japanese players, but being able to meet up with lots of them in Yokohama in 2023, it was really nice.
What an incredible place Japan is. Yeah. And this is the thing, there's the social aspect, there's the tournament itself, but then there's also the opportunity to go to all of these incredible places and and see what the entire world has to offer. So, Worlds 2023, let's go from there into who is the fifth Pokemon joining your dream team, and are they going to have a weakness to rock? Let's find out. So far it's Charizard, Poltergeist, Araquanid, and Mantine/Tine.
So my number 5 Pokemon would just have to be just my favorite Pokemon. It's Wooloo. I really like Wooloo. I think it's a cute little fluffy sheep. Yeah, it's my favorite Pokemon. Not much else to say. I guess we're keeping up the weakness to rock. So,
well, Wooloo is not weak to rock. It's
not weak to rock, but
neutral
it's normal.
Damage, yeah.
Normal is not very effective.
Right,
rock,
sure.
So
yeah, true. Wooloo,
in that sense, it's weak.
Yeah, I commend that choice heartily. I have the Wooloo holiday jumper as well. It's, yeah. There was not to love about Wooloo. And the way they roll around as well. So when you say it's your favourite Pokemon, is that purely just down to the cuteness element?
Yeah, I like sheep in general. Sheep is like my favorite animal, and then when Generation 8 came out, happened to be my first main series game as well. I just really like Wooloo. It was just, you know, yeah, a cute little sheep, as I mentioned before.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. And what a choice of favorite Pokemon there as well. Since you played through Sword and Shield, have you played through Scarlet and Violet as well?
Yeah, I have actually played through Scarlet and Violet as well. But yeah, that was only my second ever main series game.
No, of course. And have you ever been tempted to try VG as well or not?
I have played VG, kind of, you know, the in-game thing on the Switch. I don't know what's considered, you know, good in terms of how far you get up on like the kind of the ladder function. But I do enjoy doing or playing some of the VGC, but I haven't played it for a while. I haven't got the DLC yet, so there's probably a lot I would have to catch up on.
Sure,
I was planning to do well in there for some reason.
Sure, no, totally. It's just interesting to hear the difference that you experience between VG and Go, and you know, completely different play styles as well, or you know, in terms of how the games function. But okay, great. Well, I love that team so far, and now let's go right up to essentially the present. At the time of recording, this was just 2 weeks ago, EUIC 2024.
So yeah, once again, the biggest part of this to me was the whole social aspect. As I said, in London in 2022, that was like I joined the Tea and Pizza team, and at that time we were about 20 people in the team, so it wasn't like a huge thing. But since then, we kind of grew, and then at UIC we in total in the team we were like 40 to 50 people, somewhere around there, and it was just amazing, meeting up with so many of them. Some people came from South America. Most people came like from all around Europe. So we have people from Sweden, from the Netherlands, a lot of people from the UK who don't travel to different countries. So it was really nice meeting up with all of them again at UIC 2024, and it's just nice being able to win a tournament with all your friends around. It's just even better than just the winning itself.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really lovely path you've taken us on there, because you've gone from sort of being very successful at the game to going to Worlds 2023 and, oh, well, the tournament didn't go so well, but I met a bunch of great people. And then EUIC 2024 sort of ties those threads together, right? You had a fantastic time socially, but then also went ahead and won the entire tournament. And it's only, the first tournament that you talked about today was Worlds in 2022, so just less than 2 years ago. Over the course of that time, what would you say is sort of what are the biggest lessons that you've learned in terms of both how to play the game, but also in terms of, I guess, the mindset that you need going in?
One of the biggest things I've noticed is having a team early on and preparing with a team that you find good early on is really a lot more important than you'd think, because it's not only learning like the matchups with the Pokemon of those team, but it's also kind of learning what opponents kind of tend to use against that team. So if you can kind of learn what the people that you play against would use against the team that you are using, then you can really get a good feel for, okay, right, if they use this, they might have this other Pokemon in the back, for example, because like in the VGC, you don't know what the opponent's full team is until, they reveal it. So being able to kind of predict it is very important, and practicing with a team early on to kind of read what they might use is really important. And another thing is, even if you do have a bad performance, it doesn't mean that you won't have a good one, right? So for me, one of the big things about that tournament as well was I had gone to 3 regionals that season already, and they all didn't go too well, despite myself having the feeling that I had a good team for some of them. So yeah, it's really important to know your team and to be confident in your team, be confident in yourself as well before going to the tournament and also during the tournaments.
Yeah. So what would you say then, as a follow-up to that? What would you say, looking back, what can you identify about the tournaments that didn't go your way that that was the reason? What was it? Did it all just come down to not practicing with the team from early enough and things like that, or was there something else in there as well?
So the first one in that Play Pokemon season was in Lille. I did have a team that I had not decided on last second, but I just don't think I did that much practice with it as I did for some of these other tournaments. So in the end, it came down to a few unlucky calls and kind of making some wrong reads, and then it just didn't go my way in the end. The second one was Stuttgart, and in that one I just really had a bad team for the meta. Sadly, I was kind of quite weak to one of the Pokemon that did pretty well. Once again, it was just after kind of a new balance change in the game. So it was once again kind of a fresh meta, and you had to kind of discover what would be good in it. And there was just a Pokemon that I didn't think was going to be that good, but a bunch of people used it, and I couldn't overcome it. So that was Stuttgart's in 2024 season. And then the next one was in Liverpool, where I actually did have a team that I was pretty confident with, and I had actually done a lot of practice as well. But my opponent, in the end, kind of outplayed me. They read what I was going to use, and I had an unlucky matchup, sadly, despite the overall matchup looking pretty decent for me. I just used the wrong Pokemon in the decisive game.
I see. I guess it's sort of there's also an element of all of the players, of course, that you see at these events. They are leveling up all the time as well. So it's trying to control all of the things you can control, and trying to stay one step ahead, or even 2 or 3 steps ahead, almost, of what everyone else is doing as well. And I'm sure these tournaments that didn't go so well for you, people will have looked to you from previous results and tried to learn from what you were doing there. And then, so it's sort of, it's already healthy. I think everyone's sort of inspiring each other to do the best that they possibly can. But then, speaking of that, EUIC 2024, you did do the best that you possibly could, and you went all the way and won. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds to me like your mindset going into that tournament was sort of, well, I'm going to have a good time anyway, so let's just enjoy it. And then it ended up going away. How far would you agree with that?
Yeah, a bit, but not really. The tournament itself is kind of like a serious thing. Like, right, I'm going to do well at this tournament, but it's kind of after and before the tournament that the having fun with the friends plays a key part. But during the tournament itself, it's a lot more serious and a bit less kind of, right, I'm gonna play for fun.
No, no, for sure.
So
I think that's the thing. It's needing to have sort of an outlet for the energy when you're not playing, to just sort of release, that then enables you to focus when you're actually in the tournament. Is more what I meant. Of course. It's fantastic, and again, great to have that sort of connection of having the social element sort of tying up with playing well in the game as well, all leading to your success there. So, very exciting stuff. And speaking of that, it's time to round out your dream team. So who is the 6th Pokemon joining Charizard, Poltergeist, Araquanid, Mantine, Wooloo? Who's number 6?
So my number 6 Pokemon is now my favorite starter Pokemon, and it would have to be Skeledirge for me, because Skeledirge is what is kind of a bit similar to the story with Araquanid and Mantine. It's what won me EUIC in the end, and it really brought awareness to Skeledirge. Actually, I've seen it have a bit more play in multiple regionals after EUIC. But yeah, it was once again kind of a Pokemon that not that many people had thought about. I believe other people did use it, but I think only one other person in the top 32 had a Skeledirge. But yeah, it was just really fun playing with it. and it did really well against lots of my opponents. They might not have been expecting me to use it against them all the time. But yeah, that's why Scolodurge would have to be my number 6 Pokemon.
That's lovely as well that both your first and final picks are first partner Pokemon. That's a nice little story in there as well. And from Gen 1 all the way up to Gen 9 too. That's what a fantastic choice. So yeah, you are very rock weak with that team, so it's a good thing that you're not bringing it to an official tournament. I was also thinking how maybe we should extend this debate about Mantine and Mantine to Martine. Maybe you could be Martine as well. The Pokemon Go caster and, of course, player, otherwise known as an Adequant. If you're watching Martine, that one's for you. So, great. So that's your team. And what a fascinating journey that we've heard from you. And thank you so much for sharing that, Maxwell. Now I want to know, of these 6 Pokemon that you selected, which one are you going to choose as your partner Pokemon?
I think it fits the most as like a partner Pokemon. For me, it would be my favorite Pokemon, and Wooloo. You know, he can sit on your head or on your shoulder or roll around you. So just like Ash with his Pikachu, right? So
that's be a pretty small Wooloo, I think, for some of that. But
yeah, I'm sure there are some that are smaller.
Yeah, true. Yeah, true. Also, just sort of what a happy, positive presence to be following around with you, and it's great for a hug as well. Whenever you need a little pick me up, yeah, great. That'll be a fantastic partner Pokemon to have. And now, Maxwell, slightly more abstract. If you were a Pokemon, what do you think you would be?
I think, given my trainer name, it's only fitting that it would have to be Weedle, right? So, I'm a small person, or people consider me small because I'm a kid in the Pokemon Go community. So, being a small bug, being a Weedle, it just makes sense.
Hey, listen, I'm a small person as well in terms of height, and that does not mean that we can't be mighty, Maxwell.
That's true.
So why? But yeah, this was going to be a question I was going to ask actually. Why is your in-game name MEweedle?
So I don't know if you may have noticed already, but ME is just my initials,
yes,
right?
I did.
So Maxwell Ember.
Yeah.
Well done. And as I mentioned, I started Pokemon Go in 2016, right? So I was a lot younger than I am right now back then. And just Weedle was a funny name for a Pokemon for me back then. So I just put together my initials and Weedle, and yeah, that's it.
I see. Okay. Yeah, fair enough. I wondered if there was a covert reference to Mew in there as well because of MEW.
No, that's just a coincidence.
Yeah, that's just me. That's me overanalyzing, like in an English class where you you have to sort of and work out all the things that the author is doing that maybe they weren't intended. That's what I just did. Okay, MEweedle. Okay, that's makes a lot of sense. And you'd be a Weedle. Okay. Do you identify with Weedle other than that element of it?
I'm a bug. I don't know. I'm in that sense. No, really not much I can think of as
fair enough,
other than my game name and the fact that I'm kind of a small thing in the community.
You're doing yourself a disservice there, Maxwell. You're you're far more than that. Okay, great. Now it's time to turn to some questions from you all, from the community. I posted for some questions for MEweedle, and you've submitted some fantastic ones, and I apologise as ever if I mispronounce any of your names or handles. So, let's start off with this from Purple Phoebus, which is, how do you practice PvP? Do you play one day with only one team? Do you play with different teams in every set? Is it random? What's your approach?
Just generally practicing in PvP. I just do it in the Go Battle League, right? So I select a team that I think will do well. I I generally select a team of not Pokemon that I'm going to use for the next tournament, but I like trying to push and reach number one on the GBL leaderboard. So I'll always kind of look what's in the meta, and then I'll create a team and just use that. No, I actually do not really switch up the team. I kind of try and find a good team that I'm comfortable with, and then try and use those to push. I find that if I try using a different team, I kind of forget how to I don't really know how to play against certain matchups. So for me, practicing in GBL is at least just doing your battles with a team that you've used for a while to really get to know the team better to do well. Whereas for the play Pokemon tournaments, it really depends which tournament it is. For a regional, I generally try and build a team that I like and do a few scrims, make sure that it can work. But for Worlds or for EUIC, I generally like doing a lot more practice than I would for just a regional. So yeah, really just finding some friends, some teammates that are willing to help me practice, and then kind of playing against different teams with mine, see what works, see what doesn't work.
Yeah, it's all about people helping each other in the community. That's one of the best things about the game. It's made much easier when you're in the company of like-minded people. Okay, fascinating to get that insight. Thank you very much for that question, Purple Feebas. And now, question from Magmarman26. Which player that you haven't yet faced would you most want to face in a tournament?
I mean, it's hard to kind of know, because some players that I would like to face, I already have faced. I think at the moment, the number one player that I would like to face that I haven't faced is Wadaj. He won NAIC in the 2023 season. He got top 3 in Worlds at 2022 in the senior age division. He got top 3 in Yokohama at Worlds. And then he won the first regional of this 2024 Play Pokemon season. But he has sadly kind of stopped playing as much. But if there is somebody who I haven't faced yet in a tournament who I'd like to face, it's definitely him.
Yeah, good. It's there's always those people who you cross paths with a lot of people in this community, but then there are always ones who you sort of you really hope that you get the chance to. So I hope that you do at some point. Thank you for that, Magmar Man 26. A question from Mudkiped here. So, how do you go about team building? Do you focus on implementing cores or pairs into your teams of 6, or build around a particular Pokemon? How do you overcome patching holes or making contingencies for unforeseen picks?
So that's a good question. It's kind of already the answer is a bit in there. I generally like to find a Pokemon itself that I like, and then I kind of build my team around that specific Pokemon. But I don't focus too heavily on that Pokemon, because I don't want it to be, if I, for example, build it around the Araquanid and then I face against a team that has 5 things strong against Araquanid, then I'm completely stuck, right? So I like to keep it flexible, that I've got multiple things that I can still play with. But yeah, I like getting a Pokemon and then finding what would go well with that, and how can I make sure that it will definitely do well and I can use it safely against opponents' teams.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. it's finding that linchpin for your entire team is you've got to start somewhere. And when you say a Pokemon you like, is that because you think it has potential in the meta?
Yeah, it's because I have potential, and also to follow up on how to fill for any like core breakers or holes in the team or something. Generally, even if you build your team around one Pokemon, you will still have like cores in the team. So two Pokemon that go well together, that do well. For example, if you had a dragon type, then you would pair it with something that does well against fairies, for example. But if there's like a hole in the team, then I might try and replace a Pokemon that I currently have with a Pokemon that does similar to it, but covers for that hole, for example. So, or kind of replace a core with a different core that covers for that hole.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Okay. Real pearls of wisdom come out here, so I hope that you're taking heed of that. I know I certainly am. I am tempted to have a proper go at Pokemon Go. So thank you very much for...
That would be cool.
Thank you. Well, it'd be cool for everyone else to get an easy win to start off their regional championship, I'm sure. But we'll see. But thank you very much indeed for that question as well. Now I'm going to chuck in a question as well, just completely off the topic of Pokemon, to get to know you a little bit better. What's your favorite meal?
Ooh, what's my favorite meal?
And don't say tea and pizza.
No, I don't know how well that would actually go together. But my favorite meal is, you might not know it. It's a German word. It's called Flammkuchen. So it's kind of similar to a pizza, but you have like a very thin kind of pastry crust, and then instead of tomato sauce, you have kind of like a cream cheese, and then you have bacon and onions that go on top. So it's quite nice. Yeah,
that does sound good. I think I have had that before, actually.
Oh, nice.
Well, there you go. A cultural education as well. Thank you very much for your insights there, Maxwell. If you'd like to submit a question for a future guest on Chazingdra Chats, then you can find me on my socials at Chazingdra or at Chazingdra Chats. I'm on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Because I'd love to hear what you'd love to hear from the guest that I have on. So then, Maxwell, we've heard a lot about your journey up to now. What I want to know now is what's next for you.
So I actually am not completely sure what's next for me. I may compete in another regional tournament this season, but I also may not. I do know that what is next for me is hopefully Worlds in Hawaii. It would be cool if I get to go there. I still need to check kind of, I have school the week after, so it's a bit of a hassle making sure that everything's okay on that end. But yeah, it would be really nice to compete there and hopefully show that it's not only Europe that I can beat.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've done it once, you've won World once, so it's fingers crossed that you are able to participate in Worlds this year. And then finally, Maxwell, looking back to you just getting going on Pokemon Go PvP in the pandemic, your dad introducing you to that, right up to now as the champion of EUIC 2024. What is the main piece of advice you would give to that younger version of you?
It would just be, keep practicing, don't give up, even if you have a bad day or a bad tournament. You can still bounce back and just be confident in your abilities to do well.
Yeah, well, absolutely something that we all need to bear in mind too. Don't let the one-off day define you, I suppose. Well, thank you so much, Maxwell. And now the chat doesn't end there. If you hop on over to Patreon, then you can hear the Rapidash round of quickfire questions that I'm about to ask Maxwell. Questions that Maxwell hasn't prepared for about 15 or so minutes. Questions like favorite place in the world that Maxwell has been to, or if Maxwell could give a Pokemon, a Mega Evolution, what would it be? Things like that. If you want to get involved in that, then hop on over to Patreon. And if previous installments of the Rapidash round are anything to go by, then it'll be worth joining in. There's always some incredible nuggets that come out there. So hopefully see you over there if you're in a position to be able to support. And of course, either way, really appreciate you listening to the podcast and joining in the fun. Now, Maxwell, MEweedle, thank you so much for coming on to the show. It's so exciting to have had you. Well, no, it's so exciting to have had you on as someone who is so well established in the Pokemon Go scene and someone who I'm sure a lot of players look up to. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks.
And if people want to keep up with you, Maxwell, where might they be able to find you online?
Mainly on X, or formerly Twitter. I post there generally about my PvP related achievements.
And the handle MEweedle, I assume.
Yeah, exactly.
So keep up with all of Maxwell's news on there. And if you've enjoyed the show as well, then again, do have a follow of Chazingdra and Chazingdra Chats so you can be the first to know all of the latest about the podcast, be the first to know when an episode drops. Do leave a like, leave a comment, turn on the notifications. You know the drill. All of that, so that you're the first to know when a new episode comes out. But also, you know, all of the guests that I have the privilege of having on give us so much food for thought, and I'd love to know what you thought of what Maxwell has shared with us. Do you play Go? Do you not? Are you now tempted? What do you think of the strategies for Maxwell in terms of team building? Do you agree that Maxwell would be a Weedle if he were any given Pokemon? Love to hear it all. And also, of course, would love to know your dream team of 6 Pokemon. Love to know what your own thoughts on that are too. So do get on over and support the podcast. It all really helps me out a lot as well. So, now, make sure that you are tuning in next week because time to reveal the guest for next time. It is going to be Pokemon Unite caster Jake Sprague. Spraggles online is going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully bringing as many sparkles as he brings to the jackets that he wears when casting. The energy in Pokemon Unite is absolutely extraordinary. I can't wait to experience a little bit of that on the podcast, and make sure you're tuning in next week as well. Episodes drop every Wednesday. I'd also love to branch out beyond the competitive scene. If you know of people who might be a good guest to have, perhaps they're shiny hunters or they are on YouTube in a particular capacity, anyone who isn't necessarily connected with the competitive scene, do let me know. I am on chazingdra@gmail.com or any of the socials that I have mentioned. There's also my Discord community. It's all going to be linked below along with the Patreon. So that's all of the admin stuff. It's time to get into these bonus questions for you now, Maxwell. So if you're not joining us over on Patreon for that, then it's goodbye from Maxwell.
Bye.
And it's goodbye from me. See you next time on Chazingdra Chats, where there'll be another 6 Pokemon, 1 life story. All right then. MEweedle. Maxwell, how are you feeling about these bonus questions?
Well, I am excited to hear what they are.
Okay, well, let's get straight into it.